If you think 2020 was the crisis, you haven't seen 2026. This is the year everything breaks, not just inflation or crime or broken politics. We're talking total system failure. The US just passed $35.7 trillion in national debt. That's $100,000 for every single citizen, including babies. Mortgage defaults are up 23%. Over 40% of Gen Z can't afford food and rent in the same month, and real wages have fallen 9% since 2021, while eggs cost more than chicken. But this isn't just bad luck. It's a pattern, a slow-motion collapse that's accelerating right now, quietly, rapidly, system by system. And I'm going to walk you through the 10 signs that prove 2026 won't just be rough. It'll be the year millions of Americans realize the safety net is gone, the exit door is locked, and no one's coming to save you. Let's start with number 10. The middle class is being quietly dismantled, one subscription, one service fee, one upgrade at a time. Let's not sugarcoat it. The American middle class isn't just struggling, it's being systematically drained dry. And it's not by some loud, headline-grabbing collapse, it's death by 1,000 microcuts. You're not hearing about it on CNBC, you're living it. In 2026, the middle class isn't just shrinking, it's being redefined out of existence. The Bureau of Labor Statistics quietly reported in October that the average household now spends over 52% of its income on just four things: housing, healthcare, transportation, and food. That's before taxes, before savings, before even thinking about retirement or an emergency. And here's the gut punch. Monthly subscription spending in the US just passed $301 per household on average, up from $237 in 2020. That's nearly $3,600 a year on Netflix, Spotify, cloud storage, food delivery, memberships, and dozens of services you don't even remember signing up for. But try to cancel them. You'll hit a maze of deceptive billing cycles and loyalty plans designed to auto-renew behind your back. Oh, and let's not forget hidden service fees, which the FTC found have ballooned by 54% since 2021, with some hotel resort fees hitting $70 a night for nothing. Airlines are now charging $50 to select a seat, a luxury that used to be standard. You're paying more for less, and you know it. Meanwhile, the people designing these financial traps are doing just fine. JP Morgan Chase just reported record profits, over $49.6 billion, even as the average American household took on $9,990 in new debt in 2025 alone. According to the Federal Reserve, that's the highest increase since the 2008 crisis. What does that tell you? The system isn't broken, it's rigged. And the genius of the rigging is that it's invisible. It's not one moment of collapse. It's a long, quiet siphoning of resources that leaves you feeling like you're drowning slowly in shallow water. By 2026, the average American thinks they're middle class if they earn $75K, but that used to buy you a home, a car, and a college education. Now it barely covers groceries and rent in most metro areas. The middle class didn't disappear. It's being renamed high income, while the actual high income bracket floats into a stratosphere most of us will never see again. They want you addicted to subscriptions, distracted by convenience, and too overwhelmed by rising costs to fight back. That's not economic evolution. That's economic erosion. Number 9. The collapse of trust in institutions isn't a theory anymore. It's a measurable, dangerous tipping point. You don't need a PhD in sociology to feel it. Americans don't trust anyone anymore. Not the media, not the banks, not Congress, and definitely not the unelected bureaucrats who run the alphabet agencies. And this isn't a vibe. It's measurable. Gallup's 2025 confidence in institutions poll hit historic lows. Just 7% of Americans trust Congress, 11% trust television news, and only 27% trust the Supreme Court. That's not a functioning democracy. That's the early signs of societal breakdown. And in 2026, this is going to metastasize into something far more volatile. Why? Because when trust collapses, everything gets weaponized: facts, laws, elections, education, even weather reports. People don't just disagree anymore, they believe the other side is lying to them on purpose. Think about that. We now have dueling realities in a country where half the population thinks inflation is under control because the Fed says so, and the other half is watching their grocery bills explode week by week. Truth itself becomes subjective, and into that vacuum steps chaos. Here's the deeper threat: people are opting out. According to Pew, over 46% of eligible Americans didn't vote in 2024, not out of laziness, but out of disgust. That number is expected to rise even further in 2026 as midterms. And guess what happens in a system where most people no longer believe participating matters? You get power concentrated into smaller, more extreme groups. The fringes become the center. That's when civil unrest stops being a protest and becomes a movement. That's how banana republics are born, and it's already happening. 22 states now have active secession or nullification movements, And over 63% of Americans in a Rasmussen poll said they believe we're on the verge of civil war. That used to be internet fringe talk. Now it's water cooler conversation. Meanwhile, nearly 40% of Gen Z say they get their news from TikTok influencers, not reporters, not newspapers, not even YouTube. Think about that. The next generation of voters is building their worldview from short-form content curated by algorithms and corporate overlords in Beijing and Silicon Valley. You can't have a national consensus when no one agrees on what's real, and you definitely can't run a country like that. 2026 won't just be a political year. It will be the year Americans stop pretending this is sustainable. The post-trust society isn't coming, it's here, and it's about to get worse. Number 8. A quiet exodus is happening, and it's accelerating faster than you think. Everyone's talking about immigration, but almost no one is paying attention to the other exodus, Americans quietly leaving their own country. And no, I'm not just talking about the ultra-wealthy buying villas in Portugal or tech bros moving to New Zealand bunkers. I'm talking about regular families, middle-income Americans who've looked at the cost of living, the chaos, the political gridlock, and said, we're out. In 2025 alone, over 360,000 Americans renounced their citizenship or established permanent residency abroad, according to the U.S. Treasury Department. That's up 39% year over year. And the real number may be higher due to processing backlogs. The top reasons are healthcare costs, declining education standards, inflation, and personal safety. And while the media keeps churning out stories about record low unemployment, they're not telling you how many remote American workers are now living in Mexico, Panama, Ecuador, and Thailand, not as tourists, but as full-time residents, paying cash, raising families, and enrolling kids in private schools for a fraction of the U.S. cost. The phrase geographical arbitrage used to be for millionaires. In 2026, it's become a survival strategy. You can rent a luxury apartment in Mexico City for $800 a month, get quality healthcare for $40 a visit, and eat better, safer food than what you get in American grocery chains for half the price. This isn't fantasy. It's happening right now. Go search digital nomad, family, or expat homeschooling. These people aren't hippies. They're accountants, engineers, and exurban professionals trying to escape a country that feels like it's turning against its own middle class. But here's the darker twist. While citizens leave, foreign investors and hedge funds are buying America out from under us. BlackRock, Vanguard, and foreign buyers now own 25% of all single-family rentals in major U.S. cities. Whole neighborhoods have become investment portfolios. You don't get to live in your own country, you get to lease it back from people who don't live there. The result? Rents have spiked 27% nationwide since 2021 and show no signs of slowing. In short, Americans are being priced out of America. The exit door is open. The ones who can leave are. The ones who can't are stuck paying $2,300 for a one-bedroom in a city they helped build, now owned by someone who's never set foot there. The American dream hasn't just been delayed, it's been outsourced. Number 7. Retirement is a lie. The greatest Ponzi scheme in American history is about to detonate. Retirement in America is a math problem that doesn't solve anymore. And in 2026, the delusion is finally reaching critical mass. For decades, workers were told the same bedtime story. Clock in, play by the rules, pay into the system, and one day you'll ride off into a sunset of cruises, grandkids, and golf. That was the promise. But the math never worked, not for most people. According to Fidelity's latest data, the median 401k balance for Americans aged 65 and over is just $88,400. That's enough to live on for about 18 months at best. And Social Security? Don't count on it. The Congressional Budget Office just confirmed what insiders have been whispering for years. The Social Security Trust Fund will be insolvent by 2033, and benefits will need to be cut by up to 23% unless drastic changes are made. That's not some future generation's problem. That's for people who are retiring right now. Think about how many millions of Americans have nothing but that check coming in. No pensions, no assets, no rental income, just a $1,400 monthly benefit that's about to get slashed. Meanwhile, 60% of Americans over age 60 are still working, not because they love their jobs, but because they can't afford to stop. You've seen it, greeters in box stores, Uber drivers with gray hair, retirees bagging groceries. And while inflation has cooled on paper, the cost of Medicare supplemental plans is up 11.8% this year, prescription drug prices are back on the rise, and food prices are still 32% higher than in 2019, according to USDA. Here's the kicker. Baby boomers hold 51% of all U.S. household wealth. When they start liquidating assets to survive, the system cracks. That's what happens in 2026. Millions of retirees are going to be forced to sell their homes, their stocks, their retirement plans, not to upgrade but to eat. And when tens of millions of boomers sell and there aren't enough buyers, that's when asset deflation hits housing. That's when 401ks get wiped. That's when Gen X and millennials look around and realize they've been paying into a system their entire lives that has no intention of paying them back. Retirement is not delayed anymore, it's canceled. And in 2026, the first tremors of that truth will be felt nationwide. The American dream didn't just stall out, it ran out of gas. 6. America's food system is more fragile than you think, and 2026 might be the year it cracks. This is the one no one wants to believe, but they'll feel it when it happens. The U.S. food system is dangerously centralized, deeply fragile, and increasingly vulnerable to both economic sabotage and ecological collapse. And by 2026, the warning signs are too loud to ignore. First, let's talk control. 4 companies now control 85% of all beef processing in the U.S. Just 3 corporations control over 70% of the grain market. This means that when one plant goes down, when one cyber attack hits a processing center, or when just one link in the cold storage chain breaks, entire regions can see ripple effects in days. Remember, when the JBS hack in 2021 shut down nearly 20% of U.S. meat supply overnight, that was just a dress rehearsal. This year alone, there have been 49 reported unusual fires or shutdowns at food processing facilities in the U.S. That's not a conspiracy theory, that's from DHS incident reports. Add to that record-breaking drought in the Midwest, with USDA reporting over 60% of U.S. cropland facing abnormal dryness or drought in 2025, and you've got a recipe for real, lasting disruption. You want numbers. The average price of eggs rose 28% last year, rice imports are up 70%, and now even canned goods are shrinking. 15-ounce cans are becoming 13-ounce. Same price, less food. That's not inflation, that's quiet rationing. And no, you won't see ration cards anytime soon. You'll just see fewer options, thinner shelves, and higher prices permanently. Meanwhile, the Department of Agriculture just admitted something jaw-dropping. Nearly 10% of all U.S. farms will go out of business by 2026, mostly family-owned ones being swallowed by corporate agribusiness and foreign buyers. China now owns over 384,000 acres of U.S. farmland, and they're not planting sunflowers, folks. They're acquiring food sovereignty in your country while exporting their cheap lab-grown alternatives back to U.S. shelves. Look at the trend. Insect protein is being pushed as sustainable. Lab-grown meat is being normalized. Farmers are being fined for water use, and the EPA is targeting small-scale agriculture under climate policy while mega-farms get exemptions. What does that tell you? It's not about protecting food, it's about controlling it. And when food becomes weaponized, when it stops being a product of the land and becomes a managed commodity from a centralized network, then you become dependent. In 2026, you will either be someone who stores and grows your own food or someone who waits in line when the shelves go bare. This isn't paranoia, it's math. And the math says food is the next battleground. 5. Cities are becoming unlivable war zones, and the data is being covered up. Let me ask you a question. If someone dropped you blindfolded into the heart of San Francisco, Chicago, or Philadelphia, would you know you were still in the United States? Would it feel like America? Because by 2026, many of our cities no longer do. They've become micro-dystopias where violence, drugs, and government neglect have created a new kind of domestic exile. And the numbers, they're horrifying. In 2025, over 640 mass shootings occurred in the U.S., one every 13 hours. Chicago had 689 homicides and over 2,000 carjackings. Philadelphia saw over 800 shootings. And yet, the official crime stats in many places show crime is down. Why? Because reclassification and underreporting are now policy tools. If no arrest is made, it doesn't go into the system. If a robbery turns into a mutual fight, it gets downgraded. It's not about public safety anymore, it's about protecting the narrative. And while they gaslight you with numbers, reality is right in front of your face. Fentanyl overdoses are now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 49, with more fatalities than car crashes, cancer, or suicide in Los Angeles. Homeless encampments stretch for miles, and sanitation workers are being issued hazard suits to clean up biohazard zones. You've seen the videos, needle-covered sidewalks, open-air drug markets, people screaming at the air, while bystanders walk past with dead eyes. And the police in many places, they've simply stopped showing up. Over 38% of U.S. police departments are short-staffed, and in cities like Portland and Minneapolis, response times now exceed 28 minutes. That's if they show up at all. And while the wealthy install private security and bulletproof Teslas, working-class Americans are told to be patient or understand root causes. What root cause justifies your kid getting mugged on the way to school, or your car being stripped in your own driveway, or your grandmother being assaulted for her purse at a bus stop? The truth is ugly. We are witnessing the Brazilification of American cities, a two-tiered society where the rich live in gated digital palaces and the rest navigate an open-air jungle. If you're waiting for it to get bad enough that someone finally fixes it, stop waiting. That moment already passed. 2026 is the year people flee, not reform. The only way to win now is to leave. 4. The healthcare system isn't broken, it's predatory by design, and you're the product. American healthcare is not about health, it's about monetized illness. And in 2026, it's becoming so obscenely exploitative that even insiders are starting to whistle blow. You're not a patient, you're a revenue stream. And the more confused, scared, and chronically ill you are, the more profitable you become. Right now, U.S. healthcare spending sits at a jaw-dropping $4.7 trillion, or roughly 18.3% of GDP. According to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, that's more than the GDP of Germany. And yet we rank 47th in life expectancy and 36th in healthcare efficiency. Explain that math. Spoiler, you can't, because it's not healthcare, it's a cartel. And you're not a customer, you're the mark. Want proof? A new report from the RAND Corporation found that hospitals routinely charge over 400% of Medicare rates for the same procedures, and it's getting worse. The Wall Street Journal recently uncovered that many hospital systems are using AI billing tools to automatically deny claims, forcing elderly patients and desperate families to fight Kafkaesque appeals processes just to access the care they already paid for. These aren't glitches, they're features. Add to that the fact that Big Pharma raised prices on over 4,200 drugs in 2025 alone, some by as much as 1,000%, and you start to see the picture. And it gets even darker. The average American now spends $13,193 per year on healthcare-related costs, more than food, housing, or transportation. That's per person for a family of 4. That's over $53,000 a year, and 64% of it is out of pocket, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. Even basic care is turning into a luxury. You want to see a doctor in 2026? Get in line. The average wait time for a primary care visit is now 26 days, with specialists booking out 3 to 6 months in urban areas. And forget rural towns, they're becoming medical deserts. Over 1,200 rural hospitals are at risk of closure, and more than 50 counties now have zero practicing options. And who fills the vacuum? Telehealth scams. AI chatbots that misdiagnose, or worst of all, corporate chains like CVS and Amazon clinics where you'll get a 7-minute visit with someone who's incentivized to upsell prescriptions instead of solve your problem. And this doesn't even touch the explosion of medical bankruptcies, which still account for 66.5% of all personal bankruptcies in the US, according to the American Journal of Public Health. You get sick, you lose your job. You lose your job, you lose your insurance. You lose your insurance, and one ER trip costs $12,000. That's not a system failure, that's a trap. By 2026, millions of Americans are realizing that the system doesn't reward health, it manufactures dependency. Chronic disease isn't something to cure, it's something to manage for profit. If you don't opt out of this system, it will devour you slowly, quietly, legally. 3. The American education system is grooming serfs, not citizens, and the results are catastrophic. Here's the part that stings the most. We are not just watching a generation get dumber, we're watching it get deliberately de-skilled, emotionally destabilized, and financially enslaved. And in 2026, the cracks are showing in horrifying ways. The American education system, once the ladder of social mobility, is now the primary mechanism for producing obedient debt slaves with useless credentials and no real-world skills. You want stats? Buckle up. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, only 13% of U.S. 8th graders are proficient in U.S. history. Just 22% are proficient in math, and over 70% of recent college graduates cannot pass a basic financial literacy test. Let that sink in. Kids can recite pronoun protocols but can't balance a checkbook, make change, or understand compound interest. That's not an accident, that's the curriculum. And while we're at it, student loan debt in 2026 just passed $2.1 trillion. That's $2.1 trillion of unsecured, non-dischargeable debt, meaning if you die, your kids inherit it. And if you default, they garnish your wages, seize your tax refunds, and ruin your credit. Not even bankruptcy wipes it out. And what's all that debt buying you? A degree that qualifies you for jobs that either don't exist or pay less than what truck drivers and electricians make. Trades, which, by the way, Gen Z is actively discouraged from entering. Why? Because the system doesn't want independent builders. It wants compliant users, employees, and activists who parrot slogans instead of producers who understand economics, sovereignty, and personal responsibility. It's why DEI departments in U.S. universities now outnumber STEM departments. It's why gender studies programs get more funding than trade apprenticeship programs in 27 states. It's why your kid leaves for college and comes back unable to speak to their own parents. And don't think private schools are immune. The elite institutions are even worse. breeding ideological shock troops who graduate into NGO bureaucracies, tech think tanks, and government roles where they apply the same warped worldview to policies that affect you and your children. In short, the education system has become the ideological distribution center for cultural destabilization. By 2026, we're not dealing with bad schools. We're dealing with a generation trained to be incapable of critical thinking and deeply traumatized by institutions that told them victimhood is virtue and safety is submission. Meanwhile, trade skills are vanishing. Half of all U.S. plumbers, welders, and electricians are set to retire by 2030, and less than 20% of vocational training programs have the enrollment to replace them. That means bridges don't get built, power lines don't get fixed, water systems rot, and the kids holding degrees in interpretive dance and social justice journalism will have no clue how to survive, let alone thrive. Outside of curated Wi-Fi bubbles and gig economy scraps, if you want to see a nation crumble, watch what it teaches its children. In 2026, we are staring directly into the abyss of that failure. 2. Digital censorship and AI. Surveillance will make 1984 look like an instruction manual. Most people still think censorship is something that happens online, as in someone gets banned or a video gets taken down, but that's the old model. In 2026, censorship isn't about deleting speech. It's about predicting, shaping, and preventing it before you even say it. Welcome to the new regime, AI-powered, algorithmically enforced pre-crime narrative control, and it's happening right now. Start with the infrastructure. As of this year, 90% of internet traffic flows through just 6 companies, all of which are aligned with federal public-private partnership programs designed to combat disinformation, a word that now basically means anything that threatens centralized power. The Department of Homeland Security's CISA program, that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, has already been caught coordinating directly with social media platforms to flag and suppress domestic narratives around elections, vaccines, finance, and war. Yes, domestic narratives, meaning you, not foreign actors. They are not stopping propaganda, they're managing your reality. But here's where it gets chilling. The new frontier is predictive suppression. AI is now being used to score content before it's posted. If your post contains problematic patterns, it can be shadow banned, delayed, or flagged before anyone even sees it. It's already active on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and yes, even your Gmail. Some AI models are scanning private messages to identify hate speech or radicalization risk. And who defines those terms? Not you, not Congress, but unelected NGO consultants funded by defense contractors and big tech billionaires. Combine that with the rapid rollout of CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and you have the full package: narrative control plus financial enforcement. You post the wrong opinion, your payment gets flagged. You try to buy ammo, meat, or off-grid gear, your transaction gets frozen for review. Sound paranoid? Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal have already frozen accounts of people for wrongthink. Now imagine what happens when the Fed itself is in the loop. And let's not forget facial recognition, digital ID, and smart home integration. Amazon knows when you flush your toilet. Google knows what temperature you like to sleep at. And now AI systems like Palantir's Gotham platform, originally designed for military battlefield awareness, are being sold to police departments, DHS, and local governments to track threat signals in domestic populations. This isn't theoretical, it's active. In 2026, you will live under the most advanced surveillance grid in human history, and it won't look like barbed wire or jackboots. It'll look like convenience, smart homes, seamless access, and curated feeds. And behind it all, a digital panopticon that doesn't need to punish you, because it already knows how to keep you silent. The cage doesn't need locks if the prisoners never speak. 1. The American dollar is being set up to fail, and when it goes, so does everything you know. This is the one they'll deny until the final hour. But by the time the average American realizes what's happening to the dollar, it'll already be too late. Because this isn't just a recession, or inflation, or another economic cycle. What we're staring down in 2026 is the slow-motion, controlled demolition of the dollar itself, the final unraveling of the very thing that keeps the entire American system running. And they're not warning you. They're distracting you. Since 2020, the U.S. has printed over $7.2 trillion new dollars out of thin air. That's over 40% of all dollars in existence today. That's not stimulus, that's monetary arson. And now the fire is getting out of control. Even after the so-called cooling, inflation, food prices are still 31% higher than in 2019. Rent is up 22% nationally, and insurance premiums for cars and homes have spiked between 17% and 42%, depending on your state. Meanwhile, real wages after inflation have stagnated or fallen for 22 consecutive months, and credit card debt just hit a new all-time high, $1.37 trillion. Americans are now taking out loans to buy groceries, The world is quietly preparing for a post-dollar era, and no one in power is leveling with you. China and Russia just finalized a deal to settle 100% of their oil trade in yuan and rubles. India is buying Iranian oil and rupees. Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and even France are testing trade settlements in non-dollar currencies. The BRICS nations, which now represent over 45% of the world's population and a growing chunk of global GDP, are openly building a new reserve currency, backed by commodities, not debt. They're not hiding it, they're telling us what's coming. So what happens when the world no longer needs US dollars to buy energy? When oil stops being traded in dollars, also known as the petrodollar collapse, foreign demand for dollars vanishes, and with it, our ability to export inflation dies. That means everything Americans import, food, electronics, medicine, vehicles, will skyrocket in price. Think hyperinflation is a third world problem. It hits home fast when the only thing backing your currency is faith, and the world loses it. And make no mistake, faith in the dollar is already breaking. Foreign central banks dumped $346 billion in U.S. treasuries last year. The Federal Reserve is now the single largest buyer of U.S. debt because nobody else wants it. And in 2026, we're projected to add $2.7 trillion in new debt, just this year alone. That's more than the entire GDP of Italy. Every day America borrows $10.6 billion just to stay alive. That's not a budget, that's life support. The CBDC rollout is coming fast, central bank digital currencies. The Fed is already piloting its version, FedNow, and dozens of banks are on board. It's not a conspiracy, it's on their website. They're re-engineering the dollar to become programmable, traceable, and restrictable. That's not just digital money. That's the end of financial freedom. When your money lives in a Fed wallet, they can decide what you spend it on, how much, and when. You think that's far-fetched? Canada already froze citizens' bank accounts for protesting. Imagine what happens when the Fed itself is the bank and the judge. In 2026, the real collapse won't look like breadlines and riots yet. It'll look like bank runs that start online and go viral in hours. It'll look like ATMs with temporary outages, payment apps mysteriously freezing, and panicked politicians holding midnight press conferences to restore confidence. And when that moment hits, and it will, it won't just be about money. It'll be about identity, stability, and trust. When the dollar breaks, the systems we've built on top of it, retirement, savings, trade, wages, taxes, pricing, all of it disintegrates. That's why this is number one. Because when this domino falls, it doesn't just shake the economy, it tears through everything. Government, law, employment, housing, healthcare, everything. You want to know why so many elites are stockpiling farmland, ammo, and private security? It's not because they think inflation might tick up, it's because they know the music is about to stop, and only a few people have chairs. You still have time, but the window is closing. Prepare like the dollar is dying, because it is.